Okay. So we get our candies up. Okay. Hi, Barry.
How are you doing, Johann? Good to see you.
Good, good. You can hear me loud and clear?
I can. Nice background you've set this afternoon.
Yeah, it's getting a bit dark and chilly outside, so I'm moving inside the winery now.
Yeah, well, I've moved outside, as you can see. So I've got a beautiful
changed.
Background of the first tee behind me with golfers teeing off.
Must be enjoying that sound.
Yeah, and I can hear some horses passing by, so pretty idyllic.
All right. So everyone is busy signing in. Hello to Ian and Gary Marlowe. Tell us where you're from. Always nice to see where you guys are from. There's the chat section that you can let us know where you're from. There's a few coming through.
Hello, Linda.
London, Redhill, Wimbledon, Camilla, welcome. Hopefully today the technology plays along.
Gary joining us. Yeah, guys, I think welcome from my side, and just a big apology for last week. Yeah, unfortunately, we knew there could be a technical fail, and unfortunately, Zoom let us down. So, yeah, I think all of us had our wine glasses charged. Annie had her food ready, and before we knew it, we couldn't report. So we're running a week behind schedule, as everyone knows. So just a reminder for all of you, please make sure you register for next week, because if you don't, yeah, you won't get it.
But it looks like clear sky is your side.
Absolutely. We've had an interesting week last week. As I said to you, I think in one of the previous webinars, our vineyard season started off beautifully with a lovely warm spring. And there were panic stations last week as we had 3 frost incidents across England, rated as one of the worst frosts in the last 30 years. There were vineyards that have never had frost in 50 years, and they had their first frost last week. A lot of damage for those vineyards that didn't have frost protection. We were very fortunate that we have our frost fans in place, and we've had a few heaters. So all of our vineyards, except for a little pocket of Pinot Noir, actually are untouched by the frost. So we're very thankful for that. Unfortunately, we do have a block which is quite low lying, and there was a bit of frost burn on that block, even with the frost protection, because it really went down, and that was on the Thursday night. So disappointing, but I think we've got to count our lucky stars that we got away with 85–90% of our vineyards untouched.
Oh, that's good news, because it's kind of uncommon to have it in May, right? It's usually April.
Exactly, and I think that's why there was so much damage around the UK. You know, we had an early season, so there was a lot of growth, and it was a warm growing season, so the vines grew beautifully. And then to have frost at this late stage did a lot of damage. And I think we'll see it on the crop levels for 2020.
Lindsay is saying hello, Barry, to you. She met you on Friday.
She did. So, how are you, Lindsay? Becoming one of my favorite customers. Yeah, great. I think we've got all our participants in.
Okay.
So this week we're going to do something a little bit different. Annie's going to do a little lucky draw. So all our UK viewers, there will be a wine tasting here at Manning's for yourself and 3 friends. So for 4 of you, we'll do a tutored wine tasting and possibly a little buggy tour afterwards. For all our South African viewers, you can obviously get hold of Johann, and I'm sure he'll give you a lovely cellar tour and do a tasting at Benguela. So we're going to do 2 lucky draws. Annie, whenever we switch across to Annie, she'll draw a name out of the hat. We've got all the participants' names, and Johann and I will let you know who the winners are towards the end of the webinar.
Exciting.
All right, so this week, as you all know, we are tasting the Benguela Semillion Sauvignon Blanc 2016. It's a white blend. Last week we tasted the Collage, which is a Bordeaux blend, red blend, or 2 weeks back. Johann, both blends, obviously, white and red blends. What's the big difference between the wine from the winemaking side and obviously from the blending of the wines that you can tell us about this week?
Yeah, thanks, Barry. Yeah, it was unplanned having two blends after each other, but just answering your question, the approach to blending is pretty much the same. Obviously, in white wines, you don't have tannins, and you're still looking for that harmony and overall balance, but obviously something different from what you would be seeking for in a red wine from a few quality cues point of view. White wines will be consumed much earlier in comparison with reds, but I think we've covered it quite a bit last week in that it's all about getting that balance between your fruit, your oak, the alcohol, the acidity. It's getting all of those in perfect harmony to have the end result being better than the components on their own. I actually just did a few slides for us again to help me explain what it is we're wanting to get across. So blending, as we discussed last week, each cultivar or grape is a component that you need to turn and twist and fit into to complement and to work with the other cultivars in the blend. So like the picture on the left, they should all make a perfect picture, not like the one on the right where it's clearly not thought through and components are just placed on top of each other, and it leaves you with a lot of gaps and holes and edges, and the exact same goes for a wine. If you don't really work that blend, it's gonna stick out edges and sides, and might have holes in it. So yeah, the same goes, to answer your question, to blending whites as with reds. You'll remember last week I said blends are unlike, people would think blends are taking all the odds and ends in the winery and putting that together and there you go, and not the case. I mean, blends require quite a bit of training, and it's quite a thought process that goes into it, and it's something that takes time. And as you see on the left, the idea of blending is that the whole should be greater than the sum of its parts, or like we touched on last time, it's like musical instruments. You know, they're all beautiful to listen to on their own as a solo, but put them together and what you get is just something bigger and more complex and more layered. So don't get me wrong, I'm not saying blends are superior to single cultivar wines like Cabernet or Shiraz or Chardonnay. I mean, like the guitar or the violin we've got up, I mean, it's nothing better than someone that's really a master at whatever instrument it is they're playing. So the same goes, if your focus is making a single cultivar Cabernet Sauvignon or Chardonnay, they are still great because you want to appreciate that grape varietal. But having all the instruments work together, play together, can also be fun. And as I said, something with more faces to it, more layers to it, and often more complexity to it. So different wineries, different winemakers all have a different style or a house style that they produce, or a different philosophy when it comes to blending. So often a blend would be predominantly Cabernet Sauvignon or Sauvignon Blanc with a small percentage of other grape varietals in it. So the blend is still about the dominant grape varietal, but just making it a little bit more interesting by adding small percentages of other grapes to it. A bit like we've got here, the violin is the champion and the other instruments are just complementing, but at the front of the stage is the violin. Our approach is not this. So, sorry, Andre. Our approach is a little bit different in that there is no champion in our blends. Our blends is not about showcasing in this case, Semillion, or like we had in the Coulage, Merlot or Cabernet, there is no champion. We want all of the, let's say, the instruments all should add an equal part to the blend and the end result. Now, some varietals are used in larger percentages than other. If you take something like the tuba, for instance, you just need a little bit of that goes a long way. The same goes with blending, or the fluid, you need more of that actually to beat the more predominant sound. So take that to winemaking. Some grape varietals are really potent. So if you take something like Viognier or Muscat grape varietals, or big red wines like Malbec, you only need a little bit to contribute quite a big, to have a big influence on the blend. So there will always be one dominant grape varietal, but when it comes to blending for us, it's about the blend and not one being the champion. So as I explained, balance and harmony, finding that perfect spot where everything is just in perfect harmony, that is what we're looking for. And the guy at the bottom right-hand side of the screen, that's the winemaker, just making sure that everything works and plays along perfect. So balance in wine is a bit like a chair. So if you want to imagine that being the four foot of the chair, you can't sit on a three-legged chair, it will break, or two. You need all four for that to be solid and to really so that's what we're looking to achieve. So like we discussed on the reds, white blends, various countries produce various blends. Some countries like New Zealand, for instance, their champion flagship wine is a Sauvignon Blanc. They don't really blend all that often. Even places like Chile, they don't do a lot of blends. It's also Sauvignon Blanc. The Australians, Chardonnay is their kind of flagship grape. But then countries like, I'm just thinking of the most famous ones, would be probably the white Riojas from Spain, very famous for their blends. Italy is making a few interesting blends. France, in the Bordeaux region, the well-known Bordeaux blends. What else? There's the Rhone blends, which are blends of Marsanne, Roussanne, very oily, rich wines. But then also, most rosé wines are also blends, because you want to add more complexity. Each of those red grape varietals give you a different fruit profile. So rosés are often blends, and sparkling wines, as we discussed, are also, more often than not, are also blends. So the wine we're having today is our white blend, which is a Semillion Sauvignon. So
Johann, I'm going to interrupt you there.
Sure.
Firstly, just to say we're very happy to have you as our conductor and master blender, and a fine one at that, if I can say so myself. I think it's time to get wine in the glass for our viewers before they get thirsty. So if everyone can grab a glass, self included, and pour yourselves a little bit of wine before we cross over to Annie and hear what she has planned for us this week. Annie, how are you doing on that side?
I'm right here, Barry. Good afternoon, everyone. So today we're going to be making some Thai green curry marinated chicken skewers. It's a bit of a mouthful, but yeah. So to start off with, we're going to be making our marinade as usual, which just quickly consists of like a can of coconut milk, which we're just going to add in there.
And how strong do you want to make this marinade?
You don't want to make it too strong, so we're not going to add too much green curry paste. Again, because we're pairing it with wine, you don't want to overpower the wine, otherwise it's not going to work at all. You're just going to taste the burn and you're just going to ruin the wine. You're going to add some fresh coriander. And just mix it up. Yes. Give it a quick whisk. Right in there. Thank you. And that's about it. Ready to go with your mouth. Very easy. And then from there, we're just going to add it into our sealable bag again. Let's get rid of that. I'm just going to pour that in nice and easy.
Okay, and then what like part of the chicken which you suggest using, or which one are you using today?
Chicken-wise, I'm using a deboned thigh. These days you can get it from any butcher shop or any supermarket. They normally have a debone already on the shelves. If they don't have it, you can always just ask them to debone it quickly. And that's it. And then from there, we're going to marinate it. So it's going to look like that. You have your chicken in there, and we're going to put it in the fridge from about 8 hours to about 24 hours.
Okay. Again, you don't want to over marinate, I'm guessing.
Yeah, no, you don't want to over marinate it. Again, it's a curry. If you leave it in there for too long, your curry is going to be too strong, and again, it's going to overpower the wine. Same with adding too much curry in there. So there's some that I made already, but I'm going to show you how we do one quickly. It's a bit of a messy affair, unfortunately. So make sure you've got a nice wet flock on hand. So we're going to use some wooden skewers, and again, when it comes to the wooden skewers, make sure you soak them for 30 minutes beforehand, yeah? So we're going to have a bit of chicken, and then to go with that, I just have some chopped onion, a little bit of baby marrow, and some green pepper, and we just slice that in about 2 centimeter by 2 centimeter pieces. So we're just going to skewer this, and it doesn't matter in which order, it doesn't matter how much. If you want to add more veg or more chicken, you're more than welcome. I like to go about 2 of each. Get one piece of chicken out of here.
And a vegetarian option here, what would you use instead of chicken?
Instead of chicken, you can always go mushrooms. It also soaks up all the flavors nicely, and it goes with everything perfectly as well. So it won't do anything to the pairing. And there we go. That's it.
And then just pop them on the fire.
Yes. Again, you want about, it's a bit windy outside there. So you want about a medium heat again for this, otherwise you don't want to burn it. And again, sorry, I forgot to tell you, before you take the chickens out, remember to rest it for half an hour, so they're not too cold on the inside, or otherwise they're going to be raw when you're done, otherwise they're going to be burned. So all that same things that we went through with the lamb as well. Okay. Yeah.
Oh, before we forget, lucky draw. Pick a number. Okay, we have number 30.
30.
And then back to you, Johann, while I go put these on the fry quickly.
Okay. Interesting about the resting, but I wasn't aware of that at all, but it makes total sense. So lucky number 30 would be, and if you're on the call, we just need you to confirm that you're joining us today, is David Ralph. David Ralph, if you can in the Q&A or in the chat section just confirm that you are joining us, then happy to host you for that wine tasting for 4 people. Okay. All right. Barry, shall we continue with the wine?
Absolutely, Johann. I think we're keen to hear more.
Okay, so as I said, it's obviously a white blend, but it's called it a Bordeaux style white blend purely because it's been using what has traditionally been grown in the Bordeaux region. So very popular blend, these 2 grape varietals. Winemakers love blending the 2. Simply because Sauvignon has got all the aromatics, all the freshness, all the acidity, but often lacks a little bit of mouthfeel or texture or creaminess. So Semillion has got a very nice creaminess, very textury, and it's got a low acidity. So it also helps to counter Sauvignon, but it's often got a high acidity. So generally, as I'm thinking of most blends of Sauvignon and Semillon, it's in the vicinity of 80 Sauvignon and around about 20% Semillon. So you only need a little bit of Semillon to go with the Sauvignon. So when we started blending this wine, it was also, the departure was playing with bigger percentage of Sauvignon and smaller percentages of Semillon. But as we were blending and as we were trying to get that balance between the fruit, the acidity, the wood components in the wine, it ended up being a Semillion dominant and Sauvignon being the smaller percentage. You'll see it's 54% Semillion and 46% Sauvignon, if I've got my facts right. So for me, it was just another proof that whatever works and what happens out there and what one thinks should happen, just another proof that what happens on Benguela Cove is totally different from what happens in other wine farms or neighboring wine grape growing regions. It is, I don't know of another white blend coming out of South Africa, at least, that is Semillion dominant, purely because Semillion, as I said, is too big and it's too low in acidity to be the dominant one in the blend. With our cool climate and our grape growing conditions and the cooling effect from the ocean, our grapes preserve a natural acidity that's much higher than what we would normally get. And this made for Semillion to be the dominant one in the blend, and Sauvignon just adding a little bit of crispness and more the tropical fruit flavor. So it is probably one of our most awarded wines in the stable. There's a couple of them from Platters, 4 Stars, and Michelangelo, which is a competition of international judges from all over the world. Gave it a gold. Tim Atkin is a master of wine based in the UK, and he specializes on wines from South Africa. He gave it a 91. I never got scores like that at school, so I'm quite chuffed for this wine to get 90s, and then a 92 from Wine Mag as well. So enough bragging, let's move on.
But you can brag anytime. Well done.
Let's carry on to some of the next. So Annie was talking of outside, just to give you an idea of what's going on outside now. This is where we're just soaking up the last bit of sun until we go into winter and move closer to the fireplace. There's our Semillion Sauvignon, enjoying the sunset. But yeah, let's get to the wine and the tasting part of it. So I'm just maybe going to pull this down for a second. So this wine, it's a 2016 vintage that I think is worth mentioning. And the reason why we delay the release of this wine and why it's always a vintage, we try to have it sometimes up to 2 vintages after our current release of, let's say, a Sauvignon Blanc or Chardonnay, for instance, is just because it benefits so much from time in bottle and getting those secondary flavors that start to come with aging in the wine. Semillion, this being Semillion dominant, Semillion is probably the grape varietal, the white grape that ages the best of all of them. It's just got it just benefits so much from aging and its ability to age. And you'll remember me saying from previous tastings we had that one of the things that Benguela Cove, because of our climate and our soils, are known for is the wines have amazing aging potential. So here we've got Benguela Cove's aging potential, and you add Semillion being the dominant grape to this wine. This is a wine that's just beautiful to cellar, and I always try to promote this and try to get people to buy at least 6 of these bottles and not 1, because this is a wine that you need 6 or 12 of, because it's just so much fun watching this wine develop year after year, to open a bottle to see how it keeps on evolving in the bottle. So a really fun wine to track over time. So on the nose, for me, it's almost like a struck match, that smell that you get. Quite a bit of quince. And it's also got a slightest toasty, biscuity, citrusy nose to it. So a lot of aromas and aromatics. And as I said, that time in bottle just benefits this wine to gain more complexity. You'll see the color goes a little bit deeper. So it's a little bit more yellow. It's like a green gold in color. And Semillion, again, is known for having this almost like a luminous green color to it. But let's taste it. So unmistakably cool climate. It's got that saline maritime feel to it. Really crisp. It's clean. It's a bit of wine lingo. We call it tight, meaning it's got good structure, good acidity. And that Semillion, again, is the one that's responsible for giving the oiliness on the palate. It's got a slight oiliness in the mid palate, but then it finishes bone dry. It's almost like, if you can imagine, those white little river pebbles just sucking on one of that mineral dry feel that you get from that. So that's the best way for me to describe this wine. So quite layered. I like the fact that it's so dry on the finish after that oiliness, and then it's just got this beautiful length, and it almost leaves your mouth watering for more. So that's the blend. Unfortunately, blends is not selling as well as in the past, where blends was commonly done. These days, it's single varietals that people tend to go after firstly, and the blends seem to, people have forgotten about blends a little bit. So I hope this sparks some interest into white blends again. But let me tell you a little bit about the winemaking as well, while you're tasting and forming your opinion on it. So there's your blend, the passion fruit, a little bit of bell peppery notes, pawpaw, like apple notes. I had to bring this back again this week. It was quite a popular one last week, and everyone was discussing where they were on holiday and got married and went on trips to Bordeaux and island holidays. Well, those were the days, I guess. But what happened in 16? So the Donald came into play. Some fell in love, some fell out of love. Queen turned 90. Some cell phones caught fire. Do you remember that one, Barry? There was days that you couldn't get onto a plane with your cell phone. Some planes even got lost. Luckily, as time passes, you also get to forget about a few things, which in this case, at the bottom left, is good. I don't know who recognizes this. This is the pen, pineapple, whatever song it was that we had to deal with in 2016. Barry, did you ever have to listen to that?
I actually have no idea who that is, Johann, to be honest.
Consider yourself lucky. I've got a 5-year-old boy at home that discovered this song last year, so I had to deal with this for 2 years. But anyway, that's my problem. 16 was also the year of the Brexit vote. But last but not least, 2016, quite a big year for us, in that was when owners, Nick and Penny, took ownership of Manning's Heath Golf Club, which then also became the first golf and wine estate in the UK. And that's where it all started, and where you're sitting today. All right.
Absolutely. I'm sitting on that top terrace, for those of you that haven't visited us before.
Okay, so that's all besides the point. Let's get to the wine.
Johann, I just want to mention something before you move on. Just to congratulate Gary. Apparently he got married in 2016, and I believe it's his birthday today. So from all of us at Manning's and Benguela Cove, a big congratulations to you. And when you next visit us, come and chat to me. I'm sure we can organize a nice bottle of sparkling for you.
There you go. Enjoy, Gary. So this wine, I've spoken about the property and its proximity to the ocean. For those that have not been on it before, this is the Atlantic Ocean, and it's the cold Benguela current passing our property. So this is Benguela Cove. The lowest vineyards over here, it's about 2.7 meters above sea level, and it's about a 2-kilometer stretch to the ocean. So what I'm trying to say is this big blue mass has got a massive influence on our wines, our wine style, and what we have in our glass. And having such a unique location and property with all those various soil types that we have, our number one aim is to showcase this piece of land in the glass. So this specific wine that we're having today is from over here, which is the southern slopes. So southern slopes in our part of the world is the cooler slopes. So the sun, if you can follow my mouse cursor, the sun is passing over here. So this sees less sunlight during the day. But not only is it a cooler slope, but it's also got the added cooling effect from the wind coming out of the ocean. So even though it's flat on here, the whole property is like a bell curve. So this side, the northern slopes, sheltered from the wind, but these sides, the southern slopes, very exposed and in this wind. So cool slope with the added cooling effect of the ocean. So big on acidity, big on structure, and therefore this wine needs time just to settle down in bottle for that acidity to become softer. Because if you taste and drink this wine the year after it's been picked and bottled, it's so nervous, and I call it, it's like a wine in a straitjacket, you know, it's all edgy and nervous and you can't really come close to it. So we just leave it there in the cellar and let it mature in bottle and then release it a little bit later. So a combination of hand picking and machine picking. The Semillion is a very big berry. It's very juicy, you'll know. So it's a bit of a struggle picking that with the machine because it's a lot of losses and mess. So we prefer to pick the Semillion by hand. But the Sauvignons, as far as possible, well, close to everything now, we pick with these machine or mechanical harvesters. The simple reason, Sauvignon Blanc is extremely temperature sensitive. So when you do it at night, when it's at its coolest, you can put in the machine harvester. It's got lights, and we can night harvest the Sauvignon to get it off the vine when it's at the temperature is at its lowest and get it into the winery in no time. So it's a quick process, and the trials have been done over and over and over, comparing Sauvignon machine harvested and hand harvested, and the machine harvested ones, purely because you get it to the winery so quickly, has always been the superior. So Semillion on arrival gets hand sorted. The Sauvignon, we don't have the luxury of doing it, so we have pickers going out the day before the machine goes in and does the sorting in the vineyard by dropping all the bunches we don't want. Okay, on arrival at the winery, we put the grapes into this horizontal stainless steel tank. And it's got like a bladder, a balloon inside that expands. So you've got all your berries and your juice in here. As that bladder expands and it goes up to 2 bars of pressure, it presses the juice out of the berries and it runs out at the bottom of this press. So this is a photo of grape juice just being picked, coming out of the press when the pressing process has started. You can see nice and green in color. Again, the benefit of the machine harvester, but also keeping oxygen out. So heat is the one enemy for white wines, and the other one is oxygen. We don't want any oxygen in the wine. Which brings me to just something a little bit off the point. We had a question on sulfites long ago, a few webinars back. I have made a little video on sulfites, so if you want to go and check that, we'll upload it maybe tomorrow or later today. Go and check sulfites and the role that it plays. And I've just really spoke about all the myths and sulfur often being the culprit, and many times it's not. In fact, go and watch the video. Let's not spend too much time on that, but really interesting. I just put up a few facts and figures there. Once it runs out of the press, we select a tank for it to go in. So the winery is designed for every vineyard to kind of have its own fermenter. That's why we have varying sizes of tanks. Of course, we've got so much soils and slopes and row directions and clones. We want to keep all of our Sauvignons, all of our Shirazes, all of our Semillons separately, ferment them separately, and then evaluate afterwards what they look like and what we might want to blend or not. So each vineyard's kind of got its own home in the cellar. So it will either go into stainless steel, or we also, as I've mentioned before, we experiment and play around quite often. So in the case of this wine, the Semillion was the component we used in the blend came from a barrel fermentation. So we've got some in the stainless steel tank, but what was selected for this blend came from barrel. Then there's about 30% of the blend from the Sauvignon Blanc component came from the stainless steel. So stainless steel gives a nice freshness and crisp flavor to the wine, and lots of fruit, just because you can control the temperature in the stainless steel tank, but you can't do that in the barrels. So Semillion from barrel, component Sauvignon from stainless steel, and then the last 15% of the Sauvignon came from these, which is ceramic. We just call them eggs, but it's a ceramic container. We also play around like they did centuries and centuries ago with terracotta pots, but none of the terracotta component was included in the blend. So we have the same juice going into various vessels, a bit like I explained last week with the reds and the role that the vessel is on the wine and the end result. The same goes for whites. So just to explain you why this is important, if you take the stainless steel component, for instance, as I said, stainless steel has got its place because you can control the temperature with this that you see there. That's cooling jackets with cold water running on the surface of the tank just to cool it down. But then why barrels and these eggs are different? So if you remember what we discussed with the sparkling wines, that we leave those wines on what we call the lees, which is here at the bottom of the barrel. And lees are basically dead yeast cells. So when the yeast cells are finished with the fermentation, they die off and they all settle with gravity to the bottom of the barrel. With time, these dead yeast cells denaturate and they give back, so their cell walls come apart, and what's inside of these dead yeast cells are loaded with manoproteins, and manoproteins gives you this creamy, biscuity mouthfeel to the wine, which is really important to have that texture to the wine. So if you take this barrel, if you take the lees surface in comparison to the wine, it's much bigger in comparison to this tank. Because, this tank, all of that is wine, and only a little bit of this wine is exposed to lees, where with the barrel, much more wine is exposed to lees. And to help this process, we take, you might have seen on some wines, it says Sir Lee or Badenhorst. That's just the process that you see at the bottom here of mixing that lees back up. But the more you mix it back up into the wine, the more of those positive flavors and aromas you get from the lees. So we just take a golf club, as Barry, my favorite one.
I was just going to say, Johann, golf club works the best for that.
So there's a few of my golf clubs roaming around here, mixing up barrels.
Is that what you do with them, Johann?
Only thing you can do during harvest of them. But then the eggs, it's quite interesting. We don't mix them up. What happens with the egg, because of the round shape, with the fermentation that's going, it forms a turbulence, and you've got this constant moving of the wine inside of the egg. So it keeps all the yeast in suspension for much longer, and it keeps on passing by this what might be stuck at the bottom. And you can imagine the yeast is quite sticky, so it goes all the way from there around. So these also have a role. In terms of flavor, they're neutral, but they've got a big contribution when it comes to the palate weight of the wine. So I'm talking a lot. I should just take a sip of wine first.
Have a sip of wine there. We have a few more minutes.
Right, are we doing the time? Okay, so Barry, you may know that, and as I explained, that we've equipped this winery with a lot of different, and as I've been showing recently, techniques, equipment. So we've been, and we also like experimenting and playing around and pushing the boundaries on what can and can't be done to understand our property and how to best go about the various vineyards, but also to learn and to come up with the best possible wine. So we've been nicknamed by winemaking friends and colleagues in the industry as the test tube winery, which I'm okay with.
Also okay with that. That's good.
So yeah, just because we're constantly experimenting and trying out different things. You know, there's a saying that those who don't explore don't discover or get to discover everything, and I'm a firm believer of that. So myself and Michelle are constantly looking at innovative new ways, maybe techniques that's not been done before. The suppliers to the industry know that we like experimenting and trying out new things, so often they would bring new products to us to trial. We've got the ability to keep all these trials separately. Often have students coming to do their final year here, also to do their research and their work here, and we welcome that, and to be at the forefront of what's new and happening in terms of wine research, because we get to share in all of those results. So sometimes it's new cutting edge stuff, sometimes it's going back in many centuries and trying stuff that was done 3,000-4,000 years ago, like the terracotta pots, for instance. So every once in a while, some of those wines do turn out nice, and we really like the end result of what we've done. And then those would be put into a special range, which is our vinography range. So Barry, if you can just quickly take a few questions, I'll be listening. I'll just need to get my computer plugged in.
Okay, absolutely. Just if everyone, Johann, if you can hear me, I think it would be a fantastic idea to actually introduce the vinography range through a webinar in the next couple of weeks. Johann's having a permanent battle with his computer battery. We've had a good run for 5 weeks without too many technical issues. So let's hope we don't lose Johann. Johann, if you can hear me.
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay, fantastic. We're just going to run through a couple of questions before we switch across to Annie. So one of the questions from our viewers is, how would this wine compare with a wine from Bordeaux? All right, I think we might have lost Johann there. Maybe let's take this opportunity then to switch back to Annie and see what she's done for us. Annie, are you that side?
I'm alright. So off the braai. So we got our little chicken skewers over here. We're just going to plate it. And then, like I said with the curry, you don't want your curry to be too overpowering, because one thing that you actually want in the curry paste is that lemon lime flavor, and that pairs beautifully with the Sauvignon Semillion. So we're just going to stack these nicely on our little platter over here. And then with all the leftover baby marrows, we just cut them in half, and we just had them on the braai itself as well.
Just give them like a chop.
Yeah, it's just to add a little bit of color to this as well. So we're just going to pop these in wherever there's a little space. And then keeping to the Thai flavor, we just have some pak choys as well, which we just cut in half. And they take about 3 minutes as well, just very, very quickly. Just give them a quick brush with some olive oil, and then we just pop that on as well. So again, just creating this. And then as you can see, we got a little bit of a theme as well. It's all green.
Staring at the eyes again today.
I'm trying to. And then we just have some fresh limes that we're just going to pop in here again. Like I said, that nice lime flavor just complements the wine so beautifully. So just give that a nice squeeze. And then we have some fresh coriander leaves. We'll sprinkle over. And we have some toasted coconut flakes.
Looks amazing.
And there we go. That's it.
That does look amazing, guys. I get jealous every week when I realize I can see it, touch it. Don't forget about the lucky draw, please. The second round.
Thanks for reminding me.
Remember, nice mix.
And let's get up. Well, seems to be a lucky number. Number 52.
52. That'll be. Do we have a confirmation of David being on the call, Barry?
I haven't seen anything. Emily, if you can hear us, you could send Johann and I a message.
52 is Penny Badenhorst, if I pronounced that correctly. I hope so. Penny, if you don't mind just confirming in the chat that you
I've just seen Dave is on the call, so congratulations, Dave. We look forward to seeing you soon. As soon as lockdown's over, let me rather say.
Yep, sorry about that, Barry. Last week I missed my flight to you, and now I had a few technical issues. But
listen, you recovered really well, Johann. I'm sure you'll be investing in a new battery soon.
I missed you when you said something about tasting or doing a tasting.
Yeah, I just thought, just looking at and knowing these wines well, the vinography range is something that's really unique and amazing. And I'm sure a lot of our viewers have never tasted these wines. And maybe we should just do a separate webinar which focuses on these wines and give them an opportunity to buy them and then taste them in their homes. We have all these wines available in the UK. So for the UK viewers, no problem to get these wines to you. So maybe at the end of this series, we set a date and plan a webinar around these wines.
Totally. I mean, I'm all up for that. It'll be a really interesting tasting. These wines are, as I said, from all the experimentation, be that new or old ways of doing it, or just different ways of doing it, whatever we learn and discover that's really something unique or really something that works for us. So these wines are like keeping a winemaking diary, So instead of just writing it in a book, we also bottle some of these components and learnings as a memory of what we've done. And then we have like our wine club members or people visiting the property here, or yourself at Manning's Heath, are into being part of this journey and seeing what we're up to and what we're exploring. So it's also just to share and get people on board and to join us in this journey of learning. So very unique wines, but I'll have to tell you all about it in a separate tasting, because they all have their own story to them, the vinography wines. In fact, talking of coming here, we had these wines are available from yourself, Barry, as you mentioned.
Yes.
The other option is obviously visiting us over here, as we often do get visitors. And I think I've spotted Terry on the call. Terry and Brian came to visit us a little bit earlier this year in Feb, and they were the first people coming all the way from the UK to Benguela Cove, the first people ever to taste our 2020 Sauvignon Blanc from tank. So when we can go back to travel, you guys, please come and visit us, and we'll show you around and taste a few wines.
Just actually seen a comment from Terry saying, great idea to do a webinar around these wines.
Okay. Well, I'm happy to do them, but let's discuss that, and we'll be in contact with everyone on a time and a venue and the wines, and we'll take it from there. I guess we've got a few questions.
We have got a couple of questions, Johann. So the question I asked before you cut out was, we had a question, how would this wine compare with a wine from Bordeaux?
Yeah, so good question. The Bordeaux winemakers also use these two grape varietals. Quite often they use a third one, a muscadel, which makes it sometimes a little bit more aromatic. But it's like the last 20, 30 years, they've been moving away from using this muscadel grape varietal. But in terms of profile, again, because we've got fairly similar climates and growing conditions. Both this wine and the Bordeaux white blends share a similarity in that that slight toastiness, that minerally citrusy feel that you get to them. It's definitely not ourselves, and the Bordeaux ones are far from the very new world passion fruit, bell pepper driven style of these two grape varietals. So definitely this is more a classical, traditional style. So therefore quite there's a lot of similarities between the two wines. Yeah,
I can definitely second that, Johann. Another question is, you mentioned you use French oak. Do you use any other oaks in the making of these wines?
Yes, yeah. So we obviously you have the oak barrels, if I understand the question correctly, can originate from a couple of places. So Eastern European countries like Hungary, American oak, French oak, and then there's a whole lot of forests within France. There's German oak that you can use, but and there's nothing wrong with Hungarian or American oak. It's purely, we use only French oak. The simple reason being that French oak is more subtle and more elegant, is more softer on the wines. And again, of course, we want to showcase the property and the grape and the site we have, and not so much the cooper or the barrel. We choose those barrels that are just have a gentler, that allows the wine to show instead of the wood. So that's why we stick to French oak. Yeah.
I'm sure you've done plenty of experimenting with that to know which oak works at this point.
Yes, it's an ongoing thing. So we've taken a decision a while ago only to use French for the reasons mentioned, but now it's figuring out, and this is where the vinography wines, and especially something like the Chardonnay comes in, is zooming into different forests from across France and putting the same wine and juice into different barrels originating from different forests all over France, and just assessing from this soil type with this grape varietal in barrels coming from this forest in France gives us X, Y, or Z, and then deciding what complements it best.
Another question for you. What is a field blend?
That's a good one. We haven't discussed that. Yes, a field blend it's interesting, and it's still being done in some countries and part of the world. So back in the days, and when old vineyards that are, let's say, 80 or 100 plus years old, the growers wasn't always familiar with exactly what was planted there, because it might have been their grandparents or their parents that planted it. And they didn't have the techniques we have today to actually go and test what grape it is. So whenever a vine died off, let's say this year I've got 10 vines dying off in my vineyard because of age, I don't rip out everything and plant it with new vines. I just put in new vines in that 10 spots. So next year another 10 vines die off, I put another 10 in. So over years, that one vineyard is planted maybe with 10 or 15 different grape varietals. No one knows what is planted where, and all these grape varietals ripen at different stages. It can be up to a month or more apart from each other, but that whole vineyard gets picked as a whole. So there's no art of blending or any of that involved. It's just picking that whole vineyard together. If it's ripe or not ripe, everything comes. But it's super interesting wines, and also wines that have a uniqueness and a character about themselves that no one else can make, because your vineyard is planted with who knows what. So that's why they call it a field blend. It's just different grape varietals in one vineyard picked together. But it's fun wines.
Yeah, and I'm sure, from a viticultural point of view and a winemaking point of view, a bit of a nightmare, those vineyards. Yeah. I've actually heard recently someone who actually planted a field-blend vineyard, which, as you said, I suppose it does lead to a little bit of a different discussion point and something very unique. Not something that personally I think you and I will be doing anytime soon.
There's there's another question that I've spotted here, and that is also a good question, difficult one to answer, but I'm going to try. Is how do you know which wines are age worthy? Because not all of them have Semillion, and there's obviously not only limited to blends with Semillion that can age. So it's always a difficult one to answer because 95% of wines are not made with the intention of aging them. More than, I think the latest studies are showing that 98% plus of all wines are opened within the same 24 hours that they were purchased. So a lot of people are just making wine. So when you get it, you buy it, you open it tonight, that wine is showing well. And because the days of people cellaring wine, it's not that common anymore. Winemaking techniques have changed over time, but there's not a lot of stuff that's so much fun than cellaring wines and tracking them as they develop and age with time. We've got actually one wine that's purely dedicated to exactly that, which is a single varietal Semillion, which I'll also tell you about later. Our flagship white wine is made and built to last. So that is something that you buy and cellar and only open 7, 10, 12 years from now, but it's important to have obviously a library of vintages so you can track them all. But so you can either look at cultivars or grape growing regions. More often than not, the cooler climate ones, because of the structure in the wine, the acidity levels, the pHs, they make them age better. The closure of the wine, in this case, this one is screw cap, that helps a lot with aging. And I think the most important one is to check out the producer or that winery. Do they have a track record, or are they known for their wines to age? Is that what they do? That would be my recommendations. Some producers just have the soils and the environment that allows their wines to age much better than others. So it's a combination of closure, structure, the region, the grape varietals, and the producer. So that sounds very complex, and we have a lot of those boxes ticked. So it's not intentional that we do make our wines to age. It just happened to be in the makeup of the wines that, yes, they're nice and fresh and vibrant now, but should you lay them down intrinsically, they are such that they will also age well. Always a difficult one to answer, but it's a question that I get quite often.
And I've got a question here from Dave Hodges, asking me, what would the effect of the frost have on the Pinot Noir grapes and effectively the wines we're making? Dave, unfortunately, the frost tends to destroy the crop. So that little area that did get frosted, we won't be harvesting this year. And that's the big threat with frost. It's something that will literally wipe out your full crop for that year, or certainly a big percentage of it. So it actually damages the little bunch that's sitting on the vine, or the growing shoot as well. We'll still get growth on that vine, it will look great, but there won't be any grapes hanging on it.
Okay, David is asking, where is the chandeliers? Can you see
There
them?
they are. Yeah.
They are just behind me.
I think you asked, why are there chandeliers, Johann?
Why?
Yes.
Oh, that's also a masterclass on its own. It's just we've got a lot of respect for what we do and the product we work with. So it's all top kit. It's chandeliers, it's downlighters. We play music for the wines at night when we leave for home. So they're all in a good space. This is their living room, their lounge. So we give them the best, all the tender love and care they get in the vineyards, they get in here as well.
And I take it we're definitely going to have a chandelier or two here in the UK when our winery opens next year.
Do you ship to France? Barry, you might want to...
We can organize. At the moment, you don't have any agents in France, Johann?
We don't, no.
You don't, no. that's something that we must work on. But we can ship to France, obviously at a bit of a cost, but we can do it for you.
Gary is asking ideal drinking temperature. So Gary, yes, thanks for asking. Because of the texture of this wine and it being a little bit more creamy and richer, I would have it maybe closer to 12 degrees Celsius, so not ice cold like you'll have your Sauvignon or your sparkling wine. You'll see as this wine warms up in the glass, it really starts to show. So you can have it a little bit warmer, or if you can cellar it and prepare it at 12 degrees, that would be in the ideal world the correct temperature. So yeah, I think this wine is starting to show now, and as often I do the same thing. You know, if you keep white wines for too long and they start falling apart, so it's a matter of not just because it's old doesn't make it an antique, but this one surely you can keep. If you have more of this, or you can get more of this from Barry, do yourself a favor and keep this another 5 to 10 years, or even better if you can get some of the Catalina, which is a single varietal Semillion. They are limited and they are on allocation, but I'm pretty sure Barry can sort you out with some of that. That is a really fun wine to put away. What kind of percentages on the blend do you sometimes use? So Gary, the percentages are never the same. Sometimes the Semillion is higher, the Sauvignon is less. In years like the 16, you'll see they were really close to being 50-50. It purely depends on the vintage, the year, and how those wines shape in terms of acidity levels and fruit. And whatever it takes to strike that sweet spot, that is what the percentages will be. This is the closest that we've come to Sauvignon being the dominant one, but we've not had a blend yet, and we taste them all blind. It's only when we reveal that we see, oh, okay, it's again a Semillion dominant one, and we've kind of made peace with it that is what it wants to be. So yes, can you deliver that to my house, Melanie? Yeah, I'm not sure what Melanie meant there, but Melanie, you can send us an email and we'll get back to you. Definitely. But we do deliver.
Absolutely. Remembering everyone on this call, we deliver free of charge throughout the UK for any orders for all of you, 6 and more. And just a general reminder, those that are wanting wine, just drop me an email or go onto our website and log on to Shopify and we'll make sure you get your wine.
Okay, so did I miss any other questions?
Johann, I think that pretty much covers it all. We're just on an hour now, so maybe we can just chat briefly about next week's wine.
Sure. Sounds like people are wanting to have the vinography tasting, looking at some of the chat that's going on, so we'll get back to you definitely on the vinography tasting. But next week, Barry.
Yeah, so next week, I'm really looking forward to that, because in my house, you'll always find a bottle of your Benguela Cove Noble Ad Harvest. The perfect little end to a lovely meal. And that's the wine that you and I have selected for the end of the series. I think a real perfect ending to what I hope everyone's enjoyed over the last few weeks.
Yes, I just wanted to share some of Annie's, what it looks like at the end. Yeah, the Noble Ad Harvest, it's really such a special wine. It's a work of nature. It's not the winemaker. It's only in those years that the stars align and we get all the correct conditions in terms of temperature and humidity. So we've made one in 2015. Then there a whole lot of years, I think 5 years went past before we could make a second one. So it's every once in a while, as I said, it's the work of nature. It's probably one of the finest forms of wine. And yeah, I hope everybody's going to join us next week. Remember, we need to register for that again because of last week's little hiccup we had, but we'll send out the links and the communication. And if you're in doubt on what to do with the Noble, don't know about you, Barry, but I like mine really nice and cold, so you can stick it in the fridge now already, and you definitely serve that well chilled. Okay, so thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Johann. As always, it's been a great Sunday evening into a great weekend. Look forward to seeing you, same place, same time next week.
See you, definitely, same place.
Cheers,
Bye-bye.
everyone.